Fading Heritage, Language, Literature and Ritual. Let's welcome the moderator, Assistant Professor Nyonya Lee, Department of English, Language and Literature at the National University of Singapore, and our panelists, Baba GT Lye, back on stage, wayang Peranakan actor, that doesn't need more introduction, Nyonya Josephine Chia, Peranakan author, Baba Kenneth Chan, Baba Malay writer and language teacher. There were a lot of questions on Baba Malay just now. And Baba Pillay Krishnan, member of the Peranakan Indian Association Singapore.
Just a reminder that you may scan the QR code on the screen or go to pigeonhole.at/Baba2021 to ask your questions. Over to you, Assistant Professor Nyonya Lee.
Am I supposed to receive a panel?
Oh yeah, the tablet.
The tablet.
It's being sanitized.
Okay, no worries. Safe distancing, right? Tablet being sanitized. Okay, thanks for being with us still. I think the last session segues very nicely into this one. We'll be discussing issues of language. And of course, we started to talk about declining cultures, or how to make the culture more relevant, making it broader. And there were other questions about how do you, I'm going to keep my mask on. Is it difficult to hear me like that? Because I have an unvaccinated 10-month-old at home, so I'm going to keep her safe. But I'll speak louder, and hopefully this will be good enough. All right, so with that, I'll just give my quick 2 cents worth first. The notion of a declining culture is inherently a difficult one to discuss. A fading heritage is a difficult, thorny issue to discuss, but it comes at a good moment, it comes at an opportune moment, because we are no longer able to decline or deny the kinds of changes that are taking place in the community with regard to Peranakan traditions such as its language, literature, rituals, and so on and so forth, right? As a linguist, I must say that nothing is out of the blue, nothing is out of the ordinary. What's happening to Baba Malay, for example, is very common. Around the world, we are facing a global crisis where one language dies every 3 months or so. But with the death of every language comes along its own unique set of predicaments. For example, if I were to lose Baba Malay as a linguist, I would lose perhaps the only Malay-based contact language there is out there with such an expensive kinship terminology, because of course, due to Hokkien. I would also be losing a contact language that mixes a tone language and a non-tone language. So as a linguist, I would lose evidence of what the human brain is capable of. So I fear those things. Then as a Peranakan, there are other reasons for why I might care, because the language is providing me an intangible link to my late great-grandfather, who was a Cerita Dulu Kala reading, Dondang Sayang singing man, right? So I lose those links. Then to the community, you could ask other sorts of questions. For example, if we caught the kerosang, just a brooch, would that pass muster? If we, for example, caught our makko, our mak and our chim, we caught all of them auntie, would they be happy, right? So would that suffice? But no use brooding over loss. Maybe a more useful conversation to have, as with the last panel, was how do we move on from here, right? How do we make ourselves relevant into the future? How do we contextualize change like this? Do we normalize the change? What parts of the culture do we deem important and bring into the future? How do we make ourselves continue to be relevant in the 21st century? So there's no better panel than the one that we have here today to discuss this, I feel. And I won't take up too much time because we have an excellent panel lined up for you. So with that, maybe I'll pass on the time for the panelists to state their stance on the matter first before our Q&A. And with that, maybe we would like to welcome Baba GT Lye first to talk about his feelings about this idea of a fading heritage.
Thank you, Professor Nyonya. Now, as early as the 70s, I have realized that the Peranakan culture was diminishing in many ways. And being a Peranakan myself, I felt very sad of the changes that I've seen. So I tried my very best to encourage many people to do more than what is happening by introducing the Peranakan culture. When after the first Peranakan show was performed by the Ministry of Culture in 1983, yeah? After a lapse of more than 20 years, the Peranakan drama shows was never ever performed. The last performance was done in the early 50s. Then it was revived only in 1983. And actually in 1970, before the government put up the 83 show, I tried my very best to Gulong Sayang to do a Peranakan show. But it never worked out. The committee wasn't in favor of my idea. I don't know why. Yeah? When Gulong Sayang saw that 1983 show by the Ministry of Culture was a sellout, they decided to break the ice. And they started doing their first show 1984. And it was really money-making. I'm sorry to say that. It was really money-making, and they continued to do it all the way up to today until the pandemic. But they found difficulties to get a real matriarch. Because in days of old, ladies never go on stage. Yeah? Only men impersonate as ladies. But in 1950s, still they were finding it difficult to get ladies to perform. So in the 50s, the men were also impersonating. In 1950s, I'm very, very much younger than what I am today. I was very lucky. I have seen the shows, and my father was also an impersonator, and they used to have practices in my house, and I was the host. In those days, I was very, very young. Somehow or other, I observed everything, but I never was encouraged by anybody to go into acting. I have never done any acting until 1984, when I approached Gulong Sayang to impersonate because they couldn't find a good matriarch. Nobody appreciated. They said, no, you'll be an embarrassment. If you want to impersonate in 1984, you will be an embarrassment to our club. But then the late president, Mr. Kwek Yun Chuan, felt that I would make it. But I gave them an assurance. I will bow out you if you can get a good matriarch. I'm only helping you, saving you the situation. When I did that very first show in my life, I adorned the Nyonya attire. Nobody believed. When I went into the taxi on my own to do the rehearsal, the first rehearsal I had to dress up, the taxi driver, Bibi, mau pergi mana? You know, I felt so embarrassed. Never in my life people ever called me Bibi. But then I was dressed up. When I did my first rehearsal, the Straits Times reporters were there, and after the show, they gave a very good write-up about our first show. done by Gunung Sayang. But then that was an attraction to get more non-Peranakans to be interested in our Peranakan culture after the show. Of course, it was followed up by many other projects pertaining to Peranakan. Then when the shows went on for many years, I felt so happy that I have made people happy. I have never felt that happiness in my childhood. After becoming an impersonator, the audience touched me deeply. They gave me the respect I never got in my life to be very open to you. Okay?
Okay. So thank you, Baba GT Lye. I think that was great. That's an idea of how the culture evolved to meet a challenge in the 70s. In the 70s, we were already talking about a fading heritage. And wayang Peranakan, according to Baba GT Lye, sprung out of that in response to that kind of threat. And they were very popular, they were very successful. So how do we reimagine the next coming of wayang Peranakan? Or what can be the next coming of wayang Peranakan in that sense? I think this is a kind of a question that we can keep along with us as we move towards the second panelist. So maybe Nyonya Josephine Chia would like to talk to us specifically about literature then, like what do we do about Peranakan literature? Is there a future for it?
Thank you. I have a very optimistic view or belief perhaps that our culture can survive and can continue for the younger generation if we were to express it in literature. Because if we have stuff that young people are willing to read or would enjoy reading through storytelling, then the problems of the Peranakan culture, whether it will survive or not survive, and what pertains to the Peranakan culture, will be told through story form. And so I think that this is one way where we can ensure that after this generation has gone, that the literature will still be there for young people to assimilate. I'd like to quote from William Shakespeare, and he said that literature is a comprehensive essence of the intellectual life of a nation. And I believe truly that the way we express our culture will be able to tell others how we feel, what are the problems involving a culture that is perhaps diminishing. So I think that it is very promising if you look at the United States or North America and Canada, where the native Indian culture was decimated by the Europeans taking over the whole country, and they were not allowed to speak their language, they were not allowed to speak their culture, their names had to be changed to European names and all that. This is like many years on. But now there are now younger writers coming up, like Louis Erdrich in America from the Chippewa Nation, Wap Kinu from Canadian First Nation people. They are called First Nation in Canada. They are now writing about their culture. So a lot of our present, all our famous plays that you have here in Singapore and all the various things about the Peranakan culture are usually of the past. So my endeavor is to talk about our modern situation, our modern citizens, our modern problems relating to the culture. So for example, how do young people feel? We were talking, the panelists were talking about our people marrying into non-Peranakan family. How does that affect the young person? So I have a novel, Big Tree in a Small Pot, where you have a 16-year-old boy who doesn't even know his Peranakan because his father is a Peranakan, but he doesn't talk much about his culture. His mother is Chinese, so they don't talk about the culture at home. And he eventually learns through the book that he has Peranakan ancestry. So I think that these are the problems I like to explore in my books, because then we will pose the question to the reader, because this is a question, it's like with academic books, you can put facts down. But in literature, you kind of explore things so that the reader can think about it, can ask questions. And I think that through that, if our young people start asking questions about what is Peranakan culture, what am I, and who am I, what is my identity, and slowly I think that we will be able to continue with what we think will be the Peranakan culture.
Okay, thank you, Josephine, Chia. So that was a great take on it. It's got a lot of optimism in it, that kind of message that, perhaps the culture can continue through forms like storytelling, through forms of making them relevant and fun for maybe even younger readers. So following that optimism, we're going to move on to perhaps a different point of view from Baba Kenneth Chan, but we'll let him
I would like to start by saying, Tachi Josephine, that was excellent. That's very optimistic, and I agree with you. I think literature is one of the ways that we can go about in trying to save our culture and language. But that said, now I have been trying to revitalize Baba Malay, teaching Baba Malay language for a few years now. And just like what GT has mentioned, it saddens me a lot. It really, really breaks my heart in this endeavor. It doesn't mean that I'm going to give up, but it's the reality of the situation that this language, in my opinion, I feel that it will die out sooner or later. And I feel that it will die out very, very, very soon. We are at a point of time where we have, some of us still have a bridge to yesterday, to actual native speakers, to actual speakers such as Encik GT over here. I myself am very privileged to be able to communicate with a person natively, and we talk every day, but in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, it's just a matter of time, it's just a few more years, and then what? Who am I going to talk to? Nobody. A lot of my students that come to me are all usually in their 50s, their 60s. Very, very rarely you get young people. And they all come with the same notion, with the same ideas. Like, I want to learn this language because my grandmother, my grandfather used to talk, to speak Baba Malay at home. And it's the same situation with me. Grandparents. Well, my generation has come to a point where there will soon be, or there are no more grandparents. And what happens afterwards? There's nobody to talk to. There will come a time, I foresee, where myself included, I will have no one to talk to. And that really, really saddens me. And what about the youth today? Honestly speaking, there is no value in Baba Malay. There is no commercial value in it. There's no TikTok value, there's no IG value. There's just no value in it. And how do we solve this problem? I don't know. Just as what Colin mentioned earlier, I am not of that generation. I cannot identify with social media and all that. I just cannot do it. But perhaps through literature, we can salvage what little remains. And I think there's a urgency to do it before there is nothing left to salvage. We still have resources such as Encik GT still around to teach us, to tell us how it sounds like, how it's spoken. Baba Malay is not just Malay and Hokkien. No, it's not that. It's not that at all. It cannot be just learned through books. There is an urgency. So if I have a voice here today, I would say that those of you who are interested in saving it, it is much part and parcel of our identity. It is. Say what you want about Baba Malay. It is part of our identity. At least keep what little you can. Be it little phrases, little sayings, keep some idioms going in your house. I mean, it's not the best, it's not ideal, but it's what we can do. And hopefully more writers will come and write about it. It doesn't have to be in Baba Malay, but they can talk about it. I mean, that's the best we can do at this point of time, right? And that's all I have to say about this topic.
So I agree with Baba Kenneth Chan. Language is a very fraught, difficult one. particularly so because it's perhaps the most intangible of intangible heritages out there. It's not material. You can't touch, you can't feel it. You can look at Cerita Dulu Kala, but that was written in language from long ago, and most of us, even if we speak Baba Malay, cannot really access that sort of language in the same way. So it's not colorful like sarang kebaya is. It's not tasty like Peranakan food is. So it's perhaps the hardest one to kind of talk about here, but this is a long conversation and we can continue talking about it after we have talked to Baba Krishnan Pillay, who's going to come with at us from the Chitty Peranakan perspective. So that's a very different perspective that we have not heard very much of in today's session yet. So would welcome him to give his 2 cents worth.
Yep. So the Peranakan Indian, the hybrid offspring from intermarriage between South Indian merchants, traders, and the local communities, local Malay, Straits Chinese, and the Batak communities in Melaka since the 14th, 15th century. And we actually have diet as well as clothing, spoken language, that best resemblance to the Straits Chinese, to some of the local Malay culture as well. And I want to actually commend GT for the performance there and trying to make a link to Kenny's point about, the way forward with regard to fading heritage. When I watched your performance just now, I could actually visualize my nenek, my grandmother, addressing us in our special gatherings, and it brought back so many special memories, and such a credible and wonderful performance. And I think what I gained from all of that, and maybe my parents, both my parents are Peranakan Indians, maybe some of the rituals that I'm familiar with, I know because my father had come from Melaka, and so there's still that very close link. But what about my children, my daughter, she definitely will not pick up a lot of the things that I know, that I treasure. But I would like to say that DNA of inclusiveness and integration with other cultures, and that wisdom that I gained listening to the play just now, listening to my ancestors, is something that I will pass down. And if that DNA of integration and inclusiveness is so important to me, I would like to pick up the new nuances, the constant reinvention, that was mentioned by Prof. Kwa just now, and try and pick it up through maybe new literature that I would encounter, or new language that I would encounter. And for us, while one may feel that we really have a dying culture, but recently, because of the exhibition at the Indian Heritage Museum, as well as some compilation of melodies and recently National Geographic wanting to feature some of our special signature dish, the lauk pindang and all that. The Peranakan Indians actually facing a revival because of the publicity that it's getting, and people are interested to know how is it that you have this DNA of integration and inclusiveness. Yeah.
Thank you, Baba Krishnan Pillay, for that message of inclusivity and reinvention. So right now we come to the questions from the floor. So I'm just going to pick one right now that kind of talks about theater and language together, because we have great people to answer those questions together. So how do I do this?
Professor Nala, sorry to interrupt. May I share a little bit with regards to Mr. Ken? I must congratulate you for conducting these Peranakan language courses. And I must say something which I shouldn't be keeping to myself. Believe me, I have seen many times non-Peranakans who were so interested in a language, they never had the opportunity to attend any class, but they were with me every day. This one particular person, he's an Arabic, Singaporean Arabic guy, and you won't believe, after 8 years with me, he spoke perfect Peranakan. And all the Peranakan people he met, he was speaking like as if he was if you close your eyes, you may think you are talking to a Peranakan. That was the first case. There's another case, a young girl, naive, completely ignorant about Peranakan culture, completely. She got married into a Peranakan home through the instigation of the mother-in-law who loved her too much. She changed this girl from a non-speaking Peranakan girl. After 10 years, she became just like her mother-in-law, if not worse. If not worse, in every aspect. So we have to be careful. When we teach, we don't teach them the wrong things. And she's still around. So from there I saw that nothing is impossible. Non-speaking Peranakan, if they're really engrossed with the speaking Peranakan people, they will definitely be able to pick up the language. And it's a beautiful language.
It is.
Believe me, Peranakan language is so fantastic. It's full of flowery words, idioms, proverbs, Chinese inside Hokkien, Malay inside also, and the food. We have all kinds of Peranakan food, which is so popular now. Of course, not up to the standard like home cooking. Yeah? And also, see the jewelries. In days of old, this type of jewelry is only meant for baju panjang. When you wear kebaya, you wear a different design croissant. We call this a croissant. Now, modern. Gentlemen wearing this Nyonya croissant as a brooch. I have seen this not only here, it started in Singapore, men wearing croissant as a brooch. It went on to Melaka. Now all the Melaka gentlemen are wearing croissant when they go for function, and also in Penang. So you see how beautiful the Peranakan culture is.
Yes.
Yeah?
So we thank Baba GT Lye. I think that was great. As long as you know you have the motivation, perhaps it can survive some way in the future if there's enough motivation for the person to learn or for families to pass on that language to their children. So I'll come to this question over here, and I thought it was a great question because perhaps it can show some kind of synergy between different groups of people. What are the thoughts of the panelists on working with Malay theatre and language groups? Because there are Malay language and theatre groups out there. As a Malay speaker, I find that the older generation Peranakans love speaking with me in Malay, and we can work together. So what would people think, the panelists here think, if Malay language groups and theatre groups want to work together with them? So perhaps, Baba Kenneth Chan, what do you think if there was a language group that wanted to work with you, like a Malay language group?
Well, if they did want to work with me, I would say yes, why not? Great. I think any opportunity for exposure is wonderful. There's no such thing as bad exposure. The problem with Singaporeans as a whole is they don't really understand who the Peranakans are. You know, they understand that it's Nyonya cooking and so forth, so forth. But they're shocked when you suddenly speak Baba Malay and they go, isn't that Malay? They say, no, it's not, you know. So I think it's a great opportunity for exposure. But I'm sure Encik GT has more to say about this.
So what does Baba GT Lye think if
Of
like
course.
Malay language groups and theatre groups out there, you know, they want to do some collaboration? Or
Well,
have you had opportunities to collaborate with them?
I was very lucky. I had the opportunity to be involved with the Malay drama groups. I have acted with the Malay drama groups as a Peranakan, and it worked out very well. The Berita Harian had a show and I was involved. Besides drama shows, I have always been invited by the Malay Gallery, the old Istana, yeah, to perform Dondang Sayang, which is a dying art. There are many young people who can sing Dondang Sayang, but they cannot compose or create pantun spontaneously. And there's Malay groups of Malay communities, when they have their performances at community clubs and other places, they always invite me to be involved with them. So I'm very happy to work together with the Malay community here, as well as in Melaka and in Penang. Hopefully this December they will be having the Penang Peranakan Festival. They have invited me to be involved, but we still wouldn't know whether it will work out or not, yeah? So this is very good way of getting ethnic groups together and appreciating one another's culture. I performing the Dondang Sayang, which is a Malay culture. Yeah? We Peranakans adapted this Dondang Sayang from the Malay culture. See? Okay. So it's good. We should continue this type of projects.
Yeah, so perhaps part of the answer lies in collaboration with groups that are not necessarily Peranakan. So that's a venue that we can talk about and think about. So I'm going to look at a very general question over here so that everyone can get involved. And we only have 10 minutes left because we only have 10 minutes left. So we're just going to look at this question together. How can we promote more of wayang Peranakan and the Baba language to the next generation? I'm going to include how can we also promote more Baba literature as well, or Peranakan literature as well, so to kind of expand that domain. So with that, I would like to ask Nyonya Josephine, Chia, how do we promote literature, Peranakan literature, or even part of that culture to the next generation?
I admire Ken for having written a whole book on, a whole novel on using the Peranakan language. I myself am not going down that route on account of the fact that my readers are more universal, general. So I have to be very careful about how much of the language I use, because obviously it has to be in English literature. So what I try to do is to provide a nuance or coloring of the language in certain expressions, like maybe some of the nenek hukka, malata, or something like that, that will give us an impression that that person is a Peranakan. But I don't use it to the extent that Ken would use it, obviously because of the reach of audience. So, like, for example, if we have a play, a wonderful play by Stella with Emily, most of it, a lot of it is in English. But if we have a play like today, where part of it is in Baba Malay, you will have audience, if there are no translations on the screen, some of the audience will lose out 50% of the time. So that will be a problem, certainly in literature, in books that I'm writing. So therefore, we have to have a balance. So what I would like to do or endeavor to do is that in my books to encourage young people to hear, if you like, the sound of the language. That means in expressions, in the way they do or say things, so that you can tell that it's kind of like uniquely Peranakan. So, but I think that this is just to give them some interest. And I feel that maybe the books will be an opening for them. Once they read something, they might go to experts like GT Lye or Ken or whoever and learn more about the language, more about the culture. But I hope that my books will be just a kind of threshold for them to begin the exploration of what is uniquely Peranakan.
Thank you, Baba. Thank you, Nyonya Josephine. So we're going to move the question back to language, and I'm very interested and curious about what the Chitty Peranakans think about the whole language issue. So how do we encourage or promote, the use of the language with the next generation?
Yeah, so for me, I'm actually excited about the refresh Peranakan Museum because it will feature the Indian Peranakan more prominently, and I can almost visualize many, say, Saturday sessions of, about the culture that we can invite some of our younger people to acquaint themselves more deeply, and so that's a big opportunity. For the Indian Peranakans, we've not had the literature, like the works that you have produced so far, but I'm actually inspired by all that idea because we are also coming up with a cookbook, and maybe what we can do is, apart from compiling the recipes, we actually have the idea of bringing in grandmother stories, family stories into the cookbook, and maybe seize the opportunity to create some kind of literature of our own, so that it will remain as a legacy for the younger generation. Yeah,
That's wonderful.
Thank you. So does anyone want to add to that?
Support our arts. Gunung Sayang Association, such as, and all our playwrights and so forth. I think through these people, we can have a greater exposure to Peranakan culture as a whole, and through that, our language and preservation of our culture.
All right, so this 5 minutes left, okay. This question has not been voted by anyone, but I am interested in what people think about it. Baba Malay can feel very static and stuck in the past. Are there ways to modernize it and bring it into our busy lives? Maybe we need new idioms, perhaps. And related to this, there was an earlier question as well about whether or not we can kind of adapt to modern use. So is continued usage viable without vocabulary for specialized terms outside of everyday household conventions? So basically, do we invent new words if they don't exist? Wi-Fi, for example, could we survive without Wi-Fi? Do we need a Baba Malay word for it? So those things, what do you guys think?
It's like any language is ever evolving. You will have different parties who will not agree. It's multifaceted. Baba Malay in every family will be different. Some families will go, there's no such word as this, but some families will go, yes, we've been using it for generations. So I feel that that's one of the beauty of our language. It's unique in that sense. So in my point of opinion, there's the very conservative version, and yes, certain words are not used, blah, 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 blah. But we shouldn't stop people from creating new words, and that's how languages evolve. All languages evolve. The Krishnan language, for example, they've been creating new modern words rather than being stuck in the past, and I think that is a very admirable approach to the language for it to survive. Of course, this is debatable, and we could go on for years and years saying yes and no and yes and no. But it's a personal opinion. I say, yeah, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a couple of minutes left, I believe. And I would like Baba GT Lye's response to this, because I know he's working on a project that he might be excited to share. So podcasts are quite popular nowadays. Do we have a podcast that discusses our culture, literature, language, and what makes us uniquely Peranakan? Perhaps not quite the same kind of podcast you have in mind over here, but I know Baba GT Lye is working on something. Would you like to share what you're working on, Baba GT Lye?
After this show, I will be working on a podcast together with the Peranakan Museum, focusing on the Peranakan language as well as the culture in the sense of short stories, grandmother stories. So this podcast hopefully will be online sometime next year. So I hope it will be appreciated not only among the Peranakan community as well as the non-Peranakans, because I'm trying my best to make it popular to everyone so that people will have more interest with our Peranakan culture.
So thank you, Baba GT Lye. So there's something we can look forward to, right? So we can move on from here and actually be able to ensure that part of the culture survives through a podcast. And that's all the time.
We will be having more than 50 scripts, yeah? I have completed 50 scripts, and they still needed more. I don't know whether my head will be able to work any further.
We hope he stays long, healthy,
very
long live and
difficult.
healthy, and then can complete all of these for us. So thank you everyone for being here with us today. We're going to move on to the next panel because we are running short on time. So thank you again, the panelists.